Hi everyone, this is Jason Bjark of Wall Street from Main Street. Welcome back to another Wall Street from Main Street podcast interview. Today's special guest is a returning guest. He is an entrepreneur, investor, journalist, monetary scientist, and ardent defender of the freedom of speech. He holds degrees in accounting and law, and he has studied Austrian school economics, focusing on Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises. He's also the host of the Bitcoin Knowledge podcast, which I've listened to some of the episodes to prepare for this interview, and they're pretty darn good. Trace Meyer, thank you for coming back.
Oh, glad to be here, Jason. Glad to be a returning guest too. glad I had something useful to say last time.
Now, Trace, I want to ask you about a blast from the past. When I first found your work, Bitcoin hadn't even been invented yet, I don't think. You had released this book called The Great Credit Contraction. I think it was 2009. So let's talk about the book, The Great Credit Contraction. Are you surprised that we are still talking almost 10 years later about old bubbles that have been reinflated and new credit bubbles after the 2008 financial crisis?
Not really. I mean, for anyone who's read the book, it's like, oh, well, this is happening pretty much exactly as we thought it would. And by the way, the book is available for free download now for people. I figured I'd just give it away, like so much of my work these days. But no, we're not really surprised about what's happening. It's to be expected. One of the chapters I talk about like the Six Flag theory, where you have citizenship in one place and residency in another, and investments in another, to diversify political risk. And so when you have this type of massive credit expansion, and then eventually you have to have a credit destruction or credit deflation or a credit contraction in order to work out the misallocations of capital that happen, it leads to very tough political choices. And some of those tough political choices include bailouts, zero interest rate policy, negative interest rate policy, all types of moral hazard gets introduced because of this. It interferes with the ability to perform economic calculation. So no, not really surprised with all the craziness that's going on. What I am surprised with, though, is that they've been able to keep it afloat for so long. And because, I mean, the first rule of panic is to do it first. And it seems that despite 2007 and 2008, that people still haven't really panicked. And so that's kind of surprising to me. Or maybe they have, but just in small degrees. And so we get into what Jim Rickards calls like the critical mass amount or something required in the panic, because you don't know which snowflake is going to cause the avalanche. You just know that eventually there's going to be an avalanche. And so I'm kind of surprised that the massive avalanche hasn't happened yet. But humans are kind of content if there's not an immediate threat like a lion chasing them or something.
That's a great point. And a lot of people aren't even aware of a lot of the details that happened during the 2008 financial crisis and the bailouts. I mean, obviously, they've seen the documentary Inside Job. We saw the Big Short movie come out. But other than that, the average layman probably understands very little. I think they're a low information voter. One of the things I've learned, and why I think there hasn't been that panic yet, is because so many of the rules have been changed, Trace. So, the banks were allowed to basically mark their assets to whatever. And here we are on financial television. We have analysts talking about how cheap American bank stocks are, not acknowledging, that they're not using generally accepted accounting principles.
Well, I think we should keep in mind that first, fake news is a real thing. It started with Operation Mockingbird back in the mid-50s, where the CIA would place agents in the major mainstream news organizations like newspapers and television stations and radio, and then they became part of the gatekeepers. So the news for at least the last 50, 60 years has been highly politically controlled. And so we don't have real news, we have fake news. And that's part of what's happened with the internet, is the keys to the press, the keys to news and sharing information have been very widely distributed now. You've got sites like WikiLeaks, you've got channels like yours and podcasts like mine, and Amazon, where you can sell all types of different books. And so this ability to spread ideas, the cost to do so has been drastically reduced, kind of like when the Gutenberg press came out. And so that is making it much more difficult to manage public perception and opinion, because people are starting to realize, oh, it is fake news. I can't trust a single thing that any of these mainstream news channels talk about.
Yes, exactly. And what they're trying to do to counter this now is they're starting to work very hard with these censorship algorithms, whether it's YouTube or Twitter. Twitter does shadow banning, but YouTube now, Trace, is now demonetizing tons of videos that don't agree with the mainstream narrative. So they're not removing videos per se, but they have these censorship algorithms that can destroy the growth in your channel. Since September of 2016, all my analytics are down 80% across the board, and it really started to increase during the election season. It's just not fair at all, but they keep changing the rules. That's another thing, also about why we haven't had a mass hysteria with people panicking and dumping the dollar or selling their stocks. Is it seems that like a lot of the people in power, Trace, the elites, the economic and political elites, they either are lawyers or they can hire the best lawyers, and they get the rules changed for them, so they don't go bankrupt, they don't go to prison, and it just seems like an unfair, rigged system where the rules are constantly changing. The football analogy I use is the goalposts are moved while the field goal's already up in the air.
Yeah, or it's turned sideways, so it's not even possible for it to go through. But this is just part of the environment that we live in, right? And being able to understand how human action plays into all of this when you're doing your own economic calculation, because I mean, at the end of the day, what's going to happen is there's going to be massive reallocation of wealth. There could very likely be lots of chaos, as we're already starting to see in the political system. There could be all-out collapse of governments or things like this, like we see in Venezuela, because that's what happens when you interfere with the ability to perform economic calculation. At least for now, we have a relative amount to let off steam. We have a type of market, and we have tools where a lot of this steam can be let off. But I mean, it's getting really crazy in terms of just how much they're trying to control everything. And that's really part of the problem. Is this is a technological revolution that we're living in. This is a transition from the industrial age to the information age, and it's going to take place in 40 to 50 years. Whereas the transition from the agricultural age to the industrial age took only, it took 500 years. So this is going to be done in 1/10 the time. It's going to be done in half a lifetime instead of and people were living, 30 years or so, 30, 40 years back then. So, I mean, we're talking about 10 lifetimes, more or less, versus half a lifetime in terms of the rate of change and the rate at which we're going to transition into this new age. So everything's just going to be coming at people so much faster. And then we've got the demographic crisis, and we've got the demographic winter in terms of birth rates, and we've got potential life extension technologies, and it's just we're in such a period of massive change that I actually think it's kind of exciting. I think it's kind of cool. But yeah, a lot of people are going to lose their retirements because they've misallocated their funds into government treasuries or bad bonds, or lent it to municipalities or who knows what. And that's just, person who panics first is going to be the best off. Get in the lifeboat.
And the mainstream media is, fighting this battle. It seems like, I know you do a lot of interviews on the mainstream media. Do you perceive a very anti-Bitcoin, anti-gold and silver tone whenever you go on there, that, they're not objective, that they have their enormous biases, that they're highly skeptical of Bitcoin still and gold and silver?
It really depends on the host. Some of the channels are better than others, probably because that's their demographic, right? But a lot of the journalists are just clueless. They have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, which in the information age, like, why do you need someone with a bachelor's degree from Columbia to explain a highly technical subject to you when you can go to Google and read an article by a person who did their PhD and has done research in the area for the last 30 years, explain it to you? So I don't even know what role journalists really have, like, going into the future. I mean, and we see that they're just engaged in fake news all the time. I mean, it's a complete distraction, 24-hour news cycle. It's just a bunch of gossip that they're involved in. Like, I mean, I don't even really allocate any time or attention to them because, like, I don't find any of their product useful or applicable, like, in my daily life. I mean, there's nothing helpful there. Like, and it's all fake, and it's designed to mislead and deceive. And I mean, I don't know where the usefulness is. And so, are newspapers and news channels and stuff like this, are they going to go the way of the dodo bird as we transition into the information age? I think that their business model is really under, tremendous pressure. They're losing a lot of money, and it's hard to run a nice, profitable news company these days.
That's a great point. And people can tip, with micropayments and with Bitcoin and other digital currencies, a content creator now online. There's Patreon. There's a lot of other options. I think Kim.com is now working on a new application where people can tip for content. So all these things together, there's going to be a lot of options for people to go find an expert on a subject rather than, a good-looking actor that doesn't know what they're talking about to read the news or whatever, whatever propaganda their producer says into their earpiece.
Yeah, and it raises another point. Like, generating good, high-quality news or analysis is expensive. And if somebody's not willing to pay for that, or the market in general is not willing to pay for that, then why should it get created? I mean, in my case, I do a lot of it just out of kind of the goodness of my heart because I want to help warn people. But I'm fortunate to be in a situation where I can kind of do that, and it can kind of be a hobby for me. But in terms of actually making a living from it, it's and so, because the business model is so bad, like, it really shouldn't be that much of a surprise that we do get such a low quality of product because people just aren't really willing to pay for it.
Yeah, it's kind of the Wild West out there on the internet, on YouTube, and a lot of other content creation. I mean, some people become addicted to one person or expert, and I tell my listeners out there, go and listen to a bunch of different experts and figure out what they're good at, or if they have a good track record of talking about new technologies or value investments or whatever. But a lot of people, they're mentally lazy and they tend to not want to take the time to do that. But it is the Wild West out there, and now with a GoPro or any type of technology, even your smartphone, you can go out there and start doing Facebook Live, and you could start making videos, and people can see that, and you can. Some of it's not going to be good, but it gets a lot of views sometimes if it's a pretty girl or they're covering like a weird news event or a protest or something like that. So I mean, so I don't know if I would view all of it as knowledge and gathering information, but I think a lot of it's more entertainment purposes that people.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely like the entertainment aspect to news and all that stuff these days. But like for people that really want to seek out good, high quality content, it's definitely out there, and people can definitely find it. And I think it is getting much more personality driven. Not that people should just always follow a particular personality, but if they find one that they seem to be able to trust, I think that's kind of the key. You need to find sources of information that you have confidence in, and they can help do some of that filtering, because otherwise you just have hired guns at CNN that might be CIA agents that are actively trying to mislead and propagandize you under Operation Mockingbird, right? Yep. So, I mean, and Warren Buffett, he actually talked about this in his letter to shareholders a few years ago. He was talking about Washington Post, and he made an interesting comment that owning a media company has other intangible benefits besides just the earnings, right? So, like, when you look at buying See's Candies or Dairy Queen, if you're Warren Buffett, and then you look at buying Washington Post, well, if you buy Washington Post, well, now you can begin to have impact in the discussion in the marketplace of ideas, which is actually a very gratifying area for a lot of people. So a lot of people will actually participate in that for free, or they might even pay to participate in it, like we see with a lot of people generating content now, like my blog, for example. I mean, it costs me money, but I generate it. It's because I feel good, like trying to get the word out and serve people and stuff like that. But other people might do it for more nefarious reasons. The main media in the United States is owned pretty much by just 6 corporations. So of course you're not going to find really negative stories about those 6 corporations, right? But you might about their competitors, which is exactly what's happening. Shadow banning, like you mentioned, Google hitting the ad revenues. It is a form of economic terrorism or economic warfare that the state is waging against the people themselves. But we just got to be kind of resilient and go forward. And as long as we're, if we're cash flow positive, living within our means, aren't in a lot of debt, that gives us a lot of financial strength to do stuff.
I want to transition now and talk more about the Bitcoin market, since that's been your expertise now, really since you were buying Bitcoins, I think, under 30 cents when you publicly disclosed that. And I wish I had listened to you and bought 1,000 Bitcoins back then. But I want to...
Not just publicly disclosed. That's when I began to actively advocate Bitcoin. Like, there's a difference, right? Like, I wanted to share this with everybody. I wasn't just buying it all for myself, and then like go and talk to everybody. That's like I was actively advocating and talking about it when it was a nickel, 25 cents.
I want to ask you now about the Winklevoss Bitcoin ETF. Why do you think it was turned down last month by regulators?
Well, I read the 38-page opinion by the SEC, and the main crux of their reason seemed to be that Bitcoin is largely being traded on unregulated exchanges, and it would be difficult to monitor or surveil price manipulation. And based on what the current law is, and based on the conservativeness of the SEC, I actually think that it's a very safe conservative decision that they came out with, and they basically left the door open, saying, hey, if things change and 2 or 3 years from now we've got much more established markets, then come back to us and we'll probably approve it. And so I think there's definitely still hope at the end of the tunnel. The SolidX ETF got disapproved for the same reason, and there probably can be a lot of price manipulation with the price of Bitcoin on the exchanges because they aren't regulated and they're trading all over the world, and who knows who's doing what with them, right? Like, it's very, very free market. And so yeah, I think we'll probably see an ETF in a few years. I mean, you have to have good, stable, secure markets to start with, and then you can begin trading the derivative products on top of them, like an ETF. And so maybe we'll see ICE or the CME come out with trading physical Bitcoin, and then we can move to trading options or futures and ETFs and stuff like that on top of it.
One of my friends thinks that the Chinese government has stepped in, and whenever Bitcoin recently, when it got to around 1,300, the Chinese government came in and knocked it down. Do you think that the Bitcoin's price has been manipulated by the Chinese government, considering that approximately 90% of the trading volume is from China?
I don't think that the Chinese government is the one actively manipulating the price directly. The price is definitely impacted by the Chinese government through free electricity that goes to miners as part of the bribes, and that new miner flow of coins, and like there's definitely stuff going on. But like Bitcoin's a $20 billion market cap, like actually 17.8 billion right now. So it's like it's really a rounding error. Its entire market cap, let alone the actual stock and flow that gets traded. Like, I don't think any government really is in there actively manipulating the Bitcoin price on a day-to-day basis. And even if they were, what are they going to do? Manipulate the price down? Like, bring it on, because then you get to acquire more Bitcoin at a cheaper price. Like, that's great, Yeah. Because eventually they'll run out of Bitcoin to deliver.
I got in an argument with a friend about this yesterday. I was saying that gold and silver are more manipulated, especially the paper markets, is more systemic than Bitcoin. And we see this with the price action. If the Chinese government was heavily manipulating Bitcoin, it wouldn't have dropped from 1,300 down below 1,000 and then had a rally again, right? Because if I think also because Bitcoin is such a small market, like you brought up, that it's difficult for a government to go in there and throw large chunks of money at it, manipulating it, because there's not massive amounts of options or futures that they can use to control the price. It's a lot easier to do that with paper, gold, and silver markets because there's a lot more paper available than the metal. So the bullion banks or whoever else is involved in the manipulation of gold and silver, they can easily do that with all the paper futures contracts and options that are available on that.
Well, and another point that's absolutely critical to this whole discussion is that every time you have a Bitcoin transaction, you verify via the blockchain the quantity and the quality of every Bitcoin that gets transferred. And it's currently transferring about 45 tons worth of gold every day in terms of value. And I bet you that they are not, when gold is moving around with these bullion banks and everything, they're not melting down and recasting 45 tons worth of gold every day, right?
Definitely
Because
not.
they have chain of custody and LBMA and all this stuff, and then and the other thing is it's like a $9 trillion market cap for gold. So that's another giant issue, right? Is that and another thing is we don't know exactly how many ounces of gold there are, and we don't know exactly where they're at. You know, with Bitcoin, we know exactly how many Bitcoins there are, and we know exactly what addresses they're in.
Excellent point. Yeah, because the governments that own a lot of physical gold, they're not allowing independent audits. They're not doing that annually. They're not, reassaying the bars to prove that there's, 3 nines or 4 nines gold. They're not doing any of this stuff to let people know the real above ground gold supply. None of that's happening.
Well, and even if they did do it, the next day you could move stuff around and play the shell game again. But with Bitcoin, it's fundamentally impossible to do that because of the blockchain and how the blockchain operates. So, attempting to manipulate the Bitcoin price will prove to be an entirely different exercise than manipulating the gold price. And if you try to manipulate the price down, and I understand the reason you'd want to do that, because the value or the ability to issue what we use as currency is infinitely more valuable than the price of a portfolio asset. So of course there's this huge incentive for central banks or governments to manipulate the price down so they can issue their fiat currency franchises that enable them to allow in confiscation through inflation, which is a form of taxation without representation or without due process of law. So they have a huge reason to do it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do believe that. It's just, it's way easier to do with gold. And go look at GATA's work. GATA has thoroughly proved the case. They proved it 10 years ago. So the gold price is massively manipulated. But if they try to manipulate the Bitcoin price, man, this blockchain, whew. I often get asked, at panels or especially when there are lots of bankers around or whatever, I'll always get kind of asked a question about regulation of Bitcoin. And I'm like, I don't think you guys understand. I don't think governments and banks are going to be able to endure the regulation that the Bitcoin blockchain imposes upon them. Regulation imposed by math, by cryptographically provable assets and asset transfers, by this type of radical transparency in terms of the quantity and quality of the underlying asset, and then any other derivative assets, layer 2 scaling solutions, smart contracts, etc. It's just such a radical difference from how our current debt-based monetary and financial system works to transition to this equity-based monetary system that has this immutable blockchain that records every single transaction.
Trace, I also think that governments have probably unknowingly incentivized a lot of their citizens to go out and get out of fiat currencies and go and buy things like Bitcoin. And you look at policy, what China has done, they have problems with their banking system. They're probably going to have to do a bailout. They already did a devaluation of their currency, the RMB. It was 6% devaluation overnight. People aren't going to sit back and take that. If you're a small or medium-sized business owner and you have a lot of cash in your bank account, you're not going to let a government just sit back and continue to devalue you like that. You're going to look for ways to protect the purchasing power. That's why Bitcoin's doing well in China. You have other stupid policies like, total destruction of currency in Venezuela with their basically total Marxist or in socialism policies, totally destroying any type of free market there with food shortages and other things. So people, in order to survive, they're going to figure out ways to find real money and go and buy food. And Bitcoin is saving people's lives in places like India and Venezuela right now, where you have stupid politicians like Modi. Basically in a span of a week, he tried to take out 85% of the physical currency supply with his demonetization scheme. And Indians who voted for him and believed that he would help them were stupid enough to vote him into office.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't just destroy 85% of the cash supply and expect there not to be massive social changes in how people behave. And so what's interesting, though, is anytime the governments do this type of stuff, it introduces moral hazard. And that moral hazard, in many cases, highly incentivizes people to use Bitcoin, and consequently Bitcoin entrepreneurs to figure out how to help people use Bitcoin and get Bitcoin and sell Bitcoin, etc. And it makes it very profitable for the entrepreneurs to do this, to evade the capital controls or help people, get away from a lot of these regulations or restrictions or whatever it is. It's just part of how the gray market acts as a safety valve against political stupidity.
Exactly. And if your choice is either follow stupid government rules or go around the rules to buy food for yourself and your family, figure out how to get food into the country like has been done in Venezuela. Did you see that piece from Reason Magazine from Jim Epstein about how he interviewed anonymous Bitcoin miners in Venezuela and how they had figured out to use, government price controls on cheap electricity to mine Bitcoin to import it from Walmart.com and Amazon.com to bring food in by buying Bitcoin into Venezuela?
Oh yeah, I mean, I didn't just read that article. I actually had lunch with one of these Venezuelan Bitcoin miners, and spent about an hour with him talking about how the operation works and everything. But I don't know why those people talked with Reason, because shortly, a few weeks later, they actually got raided and quite a few of them got arrested. So a lot of Bitcoin activity, because of those potential threats, takes place where people just aren't talking about it. Like, why talk about it? It's not helpful.
Are you worried that central bankers and governments would try to hijack the technology behind Bitcoin, the blockchain technology, and try to issue government digital debt-based fiat currencies on a blockchain, and maybe sneak in backdoors so they can continue to print money but use it as some type of scam for a cashless society, maybe so they can track and tax every single transaction and force people out of Bitcoin, out of gold and silver, out of even using cash to go to a store and buy food or anything like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, those of us that have been involved in Bitcoin for a long time, and especially the Bitcoin core team, have been strategizing and thinking about, and game theory played out, these state-sponsored attacks on the network and the community and etc. And so we're definitely highly paranoid as a community. I mean, think about it. We're all the cybersecurity people, basically, right? And it's our money now. So we're like, not only are we, and I think it becomes extremely, extremely difficult for a government or a state or anybody or a corporation or anyone for that matter to try and do this. And, I would not be surprised if this current Bitcoin Unlimited, Bitcoin XT, Bitcoin Classic, like whatever it is, I would not be surprised at all if that is actually being funded by or is some type of government-sponsored attack on the Bitcoin network. And they're not getting very much traction. And it's because it's a free open source software. Like, it just becomes extremely, extremely difficult to try and herd a bunch of cats, because at the end of the day, everybody who runs a full node is who decides what Bitcoin is. So there isn't like any centralized point where you can exert control on with Bitcoin, because the millions and millions of people who use Bitcoin and run a full Bitcoin node, they're the ones who say what a Bitcoin is.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a reason why people really need to run their own Bitcoin full node. And the full node implementation I personally like and use is Bitcoin Core, because if there are any types of attacks or stuff like this, as long as you're running Bitcoin Core, there's you're going to be enforcing these consensus rules at your individual level. You're going to be doing something called economic consensus. And that's the most powerful thing you can probably do with Bitcoin, is to engage in your own economic consensus with the network. Because you're saying that all the work that these miners do or whatever, it only has value if it's following these particular rules.
A lot of technologies I don't view as necessarily good or bad. It's how someone uses them. But, if you go back and look through history, governments have looked at gunpowder can be used for fireworks or gunpowder can be used for weapons. So governments have a history of looking at new technology and looking for ways to hijack it and either weaponize it or,
or neuter it. Or neuter it.
Yes. Or,
and we do have to be particularly aware of that. because it is an internet protocol and the cement is drying. And so what types of abilities do we want this protocol to have in 5, 10, 20 years? And Bitcoin Core, they definitely have a very, they have an agenda for it. And that agenda includes censorship resistant, fungible, immutable, a lot of these characteristics that everybody who is using Bitcoin really, really likes, and that's why they value it, right? And so that's why they run Bitcoin Core, and that's why they enforce the Bitcoin consensus rules as applied in the Bitcoin Core software. I mean, we're looking at out of 55,000 full nodes at any given time, 93% are running Bitcoin Core software. So there's this very strong economic consensus and this very strong vote of confidence in the type of rules that Bitcoin currently has. And so, if a government wants to come in and try and change any of those rules, it's got to get every individual to run software that enforces with the new rules. Well, why do I want to enforce these new rules? That maybe instead of 21 million Bitcoins, there's 21 trillion. Kind of like the Federal Reserve. I don't want those rules. Like, I don't want miners to be in charge of the rules. Like, I'm in charge of the rules. I decide what a Bitcoin is. Every individual gets that choice with Bitcoin.
I think the governments, I don't think they can easily attack the blockchain and disrupt it that way. I think, what they've been trying to do is mostly go after the on-ramps and the off-ramps, like the IRS went after Coinbase, to try to reveal more of its customers.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that happens, which just comes with the territory, Like, you can't uninvent the Gutenberg printing press, but you can come up with the copyright and begin exerting force at different choke points and stuff like that. But that just kind of is what it is.
Yeah, and you had Brock Pierce on your podcast recently. I listened to that episode, and he was mentioning how one of his companies was helping out with the Bank of Canada testing their own government-issued digital blockchain for the Canadian dollar that's working with the large Canadian banks. So, and I'm friends with Perianne Boring over the Chamber of Digital Commerce. I was just at the DC Blockchain Summit event, that conference a couple weeks ago, and it sounds like a lot of different governments are testing their own versions of blockchain to potentially roll out in the future, not anytime soon, not this year, next year, but in the next 5 to 10 years, testing it out now. But I think it's good that a lot of corporations are making investments. I think over $1 billion has been invested by Wall Street, large corporations, and Silicon Valley into blockchain infrastructure. And it looks like, Trace, now that we've gone from kind of, this experiment, which is what Bitcoin originally was, that it's transitioning now over the next few years into a productive technology that large corporations will actually implement on the back end to, solve problems, help efficiencies, save them a lot of money going forward.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing all of that happen. Delaware, the governor of Delaware announced that they're going to be putting all corporate records on the blockchain. So like articles of incorporation and corporate charters, and then any type of commercial paper, debt issuance things. So it makes tracking that and using it as evidence in court just a whole lot easier. So we're seeing blockchain technology get rolled out and applied. Corporate America hasn't necessarily settled on Bitcoin yet, but as the technology in Bitcoin gets built out and is superior and is trusted and has all this uptime, the thought is that they will use Bitcoin in addition to whatever other technology they may be trying to use, because Bitcoin will be more secure and more stable. I think that's kind of the trend where we're going and what we're seeing too.
Yeah, and the state of Illinois is also looking at putting land titles and other deeds online with the blockchain. They're rolling that out very soon, and they're also going to put people's degrees on there as proof that you went to a university inside the state of Illinois and achieved a degree. That's going to be on the blockchain as well. So they're using it for record keeping. It's probably going to save them a bunch of money in the long run on a filing system.
Yeah, and won't that be great? When you go look at someone's profile on LinkedIn, you'll be able to see that the degree that they got, they actually did get, and it's cryptographically provable and everything. It'll bring a lot more transparency. It'll reduce transaction and friction costs when it comes to labor or anywhere we need some type of a ledger to keep record of something, whether it's degrees or money or assets or whatever. It's going to make that so much more efficient, which will be great for the economy.
Yeah, I'm in favor of efficiencies and lowering costs. Unfortunately, with a lot of government intervention, that's been tough to come by in a lot of different industries, especially the financial industry, because it's so heavily regulated. I mean, there's Perianne. I was hearing Perianne talk about all the different regulatory agencies, and one regulatory agency in the U.S. government, it looks at Bitcoin as a currency. Another one looks at it as an asset. So it's looked at as a bunch of different things by each different government regulatory agency. I want to ask you now about smart contracts. I know you're a lawyer. Have you actually done any smart contracts yet with the blockchain?
No, not personally. I mean, none of any type of economic significance. Nothing that outside of, say, a testing environment. And that's mainly just because, like, I just haven't really had a reason to. But I do go to like a lot of the different meetups where I get to see this technology getting applied and stuff like that. And actually, in several types of ways, like the way Bitcoin uses multi-signature, so lockboxes, you could say that's a type of smart contract. And so, I suppose I use multi-signature for stuff, but in terms of like trying to have my self-driving car like pay out dividends to people who own shares in it, like I haven't done anything like that yet. I think it's still very much in its infancy.
Yeah, it seemed that way from what I heard at the conference when they had experts talking about it. It seemed like at least 5 years for the adoption of a lot of these things. They're looking at putting, people's health records onto the blockchain. That's something that could potentially happen over the next couple years. Also, lawyers and insurance companies are going to be looking at integrating and using the blockchain as well. So it could potentially get involved in a lot of different industries in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I was actually invited to speak to a bunch of chief information security officers for banks and hospitals in conjunction with the FBI, to help educate them about blockchain and Bitcoin and like threats that they might have. And I had Wayne Vaughn, who's CEO and founder of Tyrion, and he's actually got a contract with Philips where they're putting healthcare records on the blockchain. So he came with me and gave a nice section of presentation to them about what he's working on with that, and I interviewed Wayne on my podcast. So anyone who wants to kind of dig more in that topic, like I'd recommend going and listening to that interview with Wayne, because we really talk about like how blockchain gets applied to healthcare and health records and stuff like that.
Very cool. I'll put a link to your podcast in the information section of this interview. I want to ask you now about some of the other digital currencies like Ethereum, Dash, Monero, Litecoin. Is there any competitive advantage with these coins compared to Bitcoin? Is there anything that will give them long-term differentiation, or are they too similar to Bitcoin and you think these are all going to die?
I don't think they're going to die. But so Monero and Dash, let's look at those first. They're trying to become privacy coins. Dash, I don't really know if I trust how they try to make their coins fungible. Monero, though, seems to have pretty good privacy tech. Problem with Monero is that it's pretty much only GUI based. Both of them, both Monero and Dash, I think are way overvalued right now. I had interviewed Evan on my podcast back in February of 2016. Dash was about $3, and Dash, it went all the way up to $9 in the first part of December, and a couple weeks ago it hit like $120.
Whoa!
Like, so it went from $3 to $120 in about 14 months, and it's since corrected to like $68. But like, if you look at the amount of transaction fees paid in US dollars, and you look at Bitcoin's market cap, and you look at Dash's market cap, and you look at these relative valuations, then Dash should be about $10 right now. And so it's interesting that before this massive like pump of the Dash price to a $700 million market cap, now it's at $492. It's trading about fair value. but it ran all the way to 120, yeah, it's going to correct. Like let's just look at the 200-day moving average on this stuff. And it's the same for all of the, pretty much all the altcoins. Whether it's Monero, Litecoin, Dash, Ripple, Ethereum, all of them are trading way above their 200-day moving averages. Ethereum, they're supposed to be much more of a consumable currency. So they kind of want to be more like oil instead of gold, right? Bitcoin wants to be like this digital gold settlement currency, ultra secure. Ethereum, on the other hand, it has hard fork security issues all the time. Just a complete disaster in terms of security. But hey, it's kind of working for the smart contract implementation, and it even hit like $50. It hit like a $4.5 billion market cap. And I think part of this might be because of the banks and like Microsoft and some other major corporations have kind of devoted capital to it, and it's like a lot of fun and exciting stuff happening there. So there gets to be a lot of speculation with the Ethereum price. I don't think it actually has a user community like Bitcoin does, so we don't know how deep or how liquid those pools are on the order books. And the other thing I suppose with Ethereum would be, I just don't think it's meant to be like a digital gold. So, like, do you really want to hold it long term? I don't know, probably not. Oh, and the other thing, who could have forgot? I recently interviewed Diego Gutierrez. He's a co-founder of Rootstock, and Rootstock is going to be porting over everything you can do with Ethereum you can do on Bitcoin. So it's like, what do we need Ethereum for? Like, we can do everything we do on Ethereum, but do it on Bitcoin instead, and we get all the security advantages of Bitcoin. So, like, what do we need Ethereum for, right?
That's interesting. These altcoins are trading a lot like biotechnology stocks. The biotechnology stocks, the junior ones, they don't make any money. Maybe they have a good lab result, so it's all news-based PRs. So, we got an investment from these guys. We're still not going to make any money, but we got investment in these, or these guys are interested in testing out, and so, the price of the coin jumps. So that's how
and it's like a $27 billion market cap for the entire industry. 18.4 billion of that's in Bitcoin. Like, I just pulled up the latest numbers. So, I mean, keep that in mind. Like, junior gold miners, like highly volatile, speculative, et cetera, et cetera. Bitcoin is making up 68.3% of the market cap. So it's kind of your safe place to go. And then, hey, if you want to speculate and play around with other stuff, like, Dash is a great example. $10 to $120 in 4 months. Like, have some fun with that,
Is there a lot of hedging available? Is there a lot of options that you can do to protect your gains? So if you do get one of those big pops in something like Dash from 9 to 100 something, is there a way to hedge your gains, or you just basically have to sell all your position then and cash out?
Yeah, I think you pretty much, I mean, to do it the right way, you need to sell your position and get Bitcoin and move that into your own private keys that you're holding on yourself, right? Get it off the exchange. Because really, it's the big systemic risk is with the exchanges getting hacked and you losing all your money that way.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you to wrap up the interview, pros and cons of different storage options for Bitcoin. When I tell people about Bitcoin technology, they're very excited about it. It sounds like it solves a lot of problems, especially the Uber drivers who are sending money to other countries. I tell them about it, and they say, like, that sounds like a great idea. But people ask about storage options. So what are some of the pros and cons of storage options? I know you're invested in Armory. But can you talk about the different storage options and pros and cons of different ones?
Yeah, so Armory is like the gold standard for securing Bitcoin in a safe, secure way. It's free, open source software, so anybody can download it, anybody can review the code, and we actually have we ran out of funding with it, unfortunately. So now it's kind of been taken over. Development's still getting done, but it's not getting done by a professional team in terms of getting paycheck and everything. But for Hod, who's one of our just star developers over there, GoatPig, he's continuing to develop it, at least for the next 18 months. And so he's got it SegWit ready and everything. That's kind of the gold standard. If you're going to be securing tens of thousands of dollars or whatever, if you're going to be storing just, a couple $100 like Copay on your iPhone, it's made by BitPay. It's free. That's a good mobile wallet. And, then you can move kind of anywhere in between. You could use a Trezor or a Ledger as a hardware wallet and an offline device. That's what we really like with Armory, having a dedicated laptop that doesn't even have a wireless networking card in it. And there's something called glacierprotocol.org, and they put together a 90-page guide that shows you how to just put your coins into deep, deep cold storage. Because that's what we innovated with Armory, was the whole concept of cold storage. And so they help walk you through all the potential attack vectors and surfaces, and how to just make sure that your coins are super safe and super secure. And that's a free PDF. So that's how I'd kind of break it up. Copay on your Android or iPhone, Ledger or Nano Wallet, Ledger or Trezor wallet if you're want a dedicated device but don't want to use something super big like Armory. And then if you got some real money at stake, get a special laptop and follow the Glacier protocol and put it into something like Armory, and then you're safe in ultimate safety and security.
Armory, I know you said Armory's looking for capital. It sounds like something that's like a vault company like Brinks would be interested in, because as they do digital storage, that Brinks would be interested in it.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of demand for that type of service. It's just a matter of, actually executing and making it work, which unfortunately we just weren't able to get done like at Armory, which is unfortunate. It's kind of set the entire industry back probably 12 to 18 months. But BitGo's in there doing a good job in terms of that corporate custody type services.
And you think that once people go to an exchange, say Coinbase, and buy Bitcoin, that they should immediately move the coins off of the exchange because that's a dangerous area to store them?
Well, as long as they're competent to handle their own Bitcoins, then they should immediately get them off of there. Otherwise, hey, take a couple baby steps. Because what we found with Armory is that it wasn't hackers stealing people's Bitcoins. It was the individual users like screwing up with their passwords or forgetting their passwords or not printing off their paper wallet or whatever, and that's how people lost their Bitcoins. So just don't engage in user error.
Or just Mark Karpelès, right? Just doing whatever Mark Karpelès does.
That's the other problem, right? You leave your coins on an exchange, like you're at their mercy. And if they're incompetent and they screw up and lose your money, like you're out of luck. And so I do not like the idea of leaving money on an exchange anywhere for any material length of time. The exception would be if you're new to Bitcoin and you need to get that technological knowledge. And so you pretty much got to do your homework. So like buy $100 worth of Bitcoin on Coinbase, send it to your Copay wallet on your iPhone, send it from there to your Armory wallet, send it from your Armory wallet back to your iPhone, send some more back to your Coinbase account. Now you've got it all working. You understand how it's functioning. Then you can start, buying more on Coinbase and moving it into Armory. That's how I'd kind of look at it. If you got $100 worth of Bitcoin, you can put $100 of thought into securing it. If you've got $50,000 worth of Bitcoin, you need to put $50,000 worth of thought into securing it.
Good points. And I think, as the central planners and governments become more and more desperate, I think people should definitely have Bitcoin, physical gold and silver, and, it shouldn't be stored in just one place because there is an enormous amount of political risk out there, and the politicians do want to keep changing the rules. So having cash, having Bitcoin, having gold and silver, all four of those things for liquidity purposes. And I know you also wrote the website How to Vanish. So maybe if you have enough money for a couple passports, then it's a good idea for diversification purposes.
Yeah. And, one of the great things about Bitcoin is that it's literally a number. Because we're transferring value over a communications channel, over something like a radio wave or a fiber optic cable, right? So Bitcoin is literally just a number, which means that it can exist in multiple different places at the same time, unlike a gold coin. And it's way more portable because of that particular attribute.
Yes, and you can also walk it right across right through an airport in a USB drive or a thumb drive. So can't do that with gold and silver. So
well, yeah, but why even have it on a thumb drive that's on your person? Because you could get searched at the border. I mean, you upload it to you have it totally encrypted and it's uploaded to a server, or you use stenography and put it into a cat picture, and then you go download the cat picture when you're in the new country and extract the private key out of it, and then you didn't pass the border with anything. There's nothing for the Border Patrol officer to even search, assuming you were to get searched.
That's very interesting. Well, it brings up a new... I know that government regulators now are studying Bitcoin very heavily. So, Americans are going to they're going to try to prevent Americans from doing this. I don't know how they can, but I know the government agencies are looking into this very heavily now.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. There actually are quite a few very strong Bitcoin proponents in the Trump administration. You've got Peter Thiel, he's an investor in BitPay with me, leading the economic transition team. So he's going to be like, hey, do you have any idea how many jobs we can create with blockchain and Bitcoin technology? Then you've got Mulvaney, who just got confirmed to be the budget director, Office of Budget Management, I think, and former senator, and he's a huge Bitcoin proponent, and that's cabinet level position. Then you've got several other congressmen and senators. So, maybe the tide's turning and the U.S. is deciding, you know what, maybe we should make math legal in the United States. Maybe we should stop trying to make numbers illegal, because there are actually illegal primes. It's illegal to possess certain prime numbers in the United States. So maybe they'll stop this crazy war on math and scientists that they're waging. Because we like our Isaac Newtons and Copernicuses and Galileos. They help us move the world forward.
That's very interesting that people at the top are pro Bitcoin. I know I actually speak off the record with medium, like middle level management people in government agencies and lower level, and they don't share the same views. But these people are career bureaucrats. They're not libertarian. They're not even Republican. A lot of them are hardcore Democrats. So they don't like anyone who's rich. They are naturally skeptical of anyone who's been making a lot of money lately or providing a new technology. They think it'll hurt the government or hurt their way to change the world with their central planning.
Yeah, well, they don't change the world. They're just cogs in a machine that don't really matter and are completely replaceable and disposable. So
I agree with you, but if I said that to their face, I don't think it would end well.
I mean, it's the truth though. Like, yeah, I mean, if they want to really have an impact on the world and they want to have a legacy of any kind, like, they should go out and build something new. You know what I mean? Like, that's what's happening in Bitcoin and technology in general. I mean, people are building a new world. Amazon, Facebook, Bitcoin,
Uber,
all this stuff.
Yeah, Uber disrupted that taxi cab monopoly, which is ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah. So hey, do you want to be a nameless, faceless bureaucrat that has trammeled progress and persecuted Copernicus? Or do you want to actually build a better world and build something new that like helps people and helps people's lives?